4-13 matchup in the Midwest features 4 seed Purdue, 13 seed High Point, and right standing out right from the jump is Purdue's 2-point defense. Right, this is a very intriguing matchup. I think actually, not a matchup that I've heard a lot of people talking about, but I think one that has very, very real upset potential, right? The staggering number, right? Purdue gives up a 70.7 field goal percentage of shots at the rim. Worst in the country by, what did you say, 2%? Just 2%, a wild statistic. Purdue really, really struggles to defend the rim. And, to take that a step further, they're 348th in the country out of 364 in 2-point percentage defense. So any shot inside the arc, they're giving up 56.5%. And they're facing a High Point team who's 15th in the country in 2-point field goal percentage at 57.4% and 63.6 at the rim. So, this has a little bit of intrigue to me. I'm actually, we'll get into it a little bit more here, but this is actually a game I'm going to make an upset pick and say High Point takes down the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue coming off that national championship loss last year. They might be going home early again this year.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of intrigue for that when you look into the matchup. Like the fact that they have the worst 2-point or the worst rim percentage defense, like it's pretty incredible. I mean, and it checks out when you watch the games. Like Trey Kaufman-Renn is like probably one of the worst power conference rim protectors in the entire power conference landscape. Like he's a great offensive player. He's made huge strides in that area. He's not completely taken over the role of Zach Edey, but like he's been very good and extremely efficient. But at the cost of the defense kind of having to completely switch the way they play. Like, they give up a ton of they give up 70% of the rim, but they don't give up a lot of attempts at the rim. They're 18th percentile in rim rate allowed. But they are the worst rim defense in the entire country. And it's with that no middle style that's going to allow a lot of threes. And it's actually a lot of unguarded threes for Purdue. 60% of their catch and shoot attempts allowed, 44% of their catch and shoot attempts allowed are unguarded, and that's in the 60th percentile. And against that, they're in the 98th percentile in points per possession against an unguarded three, which it's merely a luck stat. So they've even been lucky on the perimeter defensive aspect of this. So I just think their defense is kind of in shambles, and they kind of proved that over the home stretch of the season, and they proved it again against Michigan in the Big Ten tournament. This High Point offense sets up extremely well to have success. I mean, they have weapons. They have former power conference weapons. Like Bobby Pettiford is a former, I think was he a former 5-star to Kansas? 4-star? Sure. I think he was a 4-star, maybe 5-star to Kansas. He doesn't even start for this team. He's their 6th man. Obviously Chase Johnson is a really, really good shooter. They have DeMaurian Williams, former Texas Tech guy. Kamani Hamilton, forget where he was, but he was also in the power conference landscape as well. So they have a ton of perimeter weapons that can get a lot of catch and shoot opportunities against this defense, can really space out this defense, and that'll open up the rim for these guys, open up driving lanes. So I think their offense has all of the upside in the world to get to 85, 90 points. The problem, their defense isn't very good. They're 213th in adjusted defensive efficiency, and they haven't really played that great of competition, albeit the two toughest teams they played this year, they beat UAB and they beat North Texas at home. So they kind of have to rely on Jocelyn Bodo against Trey Kaufman-Renn in the post. They play a drop coverage style defense, and we've seen Purdue's combo of Smith and Kaufman-Renn kind of carve up drop coverage. So they might have to switch something up, and that kind of creates it gets kind of iffy for their defense in that regard, because they don't do a lot of great things, but besides being like analytically driven defensively, and they force a lot of jumpers in the mid range. But overall, I think there's a ton of upside for High Point to win. I won't officially take High Point to win, but it's going to be a super fun game, back and forth. I expect a lot of scoring runs back and forth. So, yeah, definitely one of the more fun games of the first round for me.
Yeah, I agree. And further your point about Purdue giving up a lot of open catch and shoot threes, High Point, I think, can have some success here on the offensive glass. They've shown they're top 60 in the country, or they're top 60, 58th in offensive rebound rate. Purdue kind of in that middle third of the country in defensive rebound rate, and that kind of goes along with their lack of like rim protection rebounding is part of that, right? And so I think High Point, if they can get on the glass, and oftentimes what you find on offensive rebounds is everyone collapses, right? You get those spray out threes to some of these shooters. Maybe High Point can really get it going and knock down 10, 12, 14 threes and keep themselves in this game. Braden Smith, obviously Big Ten Player of the Year. He's going to lead Purdue, always under control, right, making the right decision. And Kaufman Wren, he's shown probably the most growth of any power conference player this year. Offensively, he's been great. So those two are going to be tough for High Point to stop. But I do think there are some paths, like you said, for High Point to win this game. I haven't picked many upsets, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say High Point gets this one done. Because even if Purdue does win this game, I think it's a tough spot for them against Clemson in the second round. But I'm going to side with High Point here. I know you're not, but I think this will be a really fun first round matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if High Point can start the game making 3 or 4 threes in the first 5-6 minutes, I think there's going to be real life, and Purdue playing catch up. They're going to put a lot of pressure on them. We've seen Purdue under pressure in a tournament setting, and it hasn't been pretty. I mean, especially against FDU and that 116 matchup a couple of years ago. Yeah. I think this team kind of has similar makeup to that team. That I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they don't have dogs on their roster. Like, that's not the way I kind of view things. But the lack of physical presence makes them a bit vulnerable. And I just don't think this defense, that switching to a no middle defense in the middle of the season with a lack of athletes, lack of rim protection, it shapes up for a disaster. And High Point sets up really well. As we've both talked about, they have advantages in pretty much every area against this poor Boilermakers defense.
Right. So look for this to be a fun first round matchup. Not really sure what we're going to get, but definitely has some upset potential and some intrigue. So it'll be interesting to see who moves on to the round of 32.